Let's say this project is a large pharmaceutical facility, plus $1 billion, a multi-year effort, and it is currently running 6 months late and costs are going out of control. You've been asked by the VP, you have all access, all powers to fix it. How do you do it?
You get into it and you find out that the contractors had very weak processes established. For example, the weather delay was not considered in original baseline, and you hit with 3 hurricanes right after another. And there you go, you have over a month delay already on something like pharmaceutical manufacturing constructions, usually very high critical projects. And if you're late to provide medication to the patients.
When you're doing the pull plan, are you doing a backwards pass?
We usually do backward pass because ultimately when the project is in pre-negotiations, they already have the dates needed on the market. Because of that, we have to do the backward pass because we have those dates, 9 years out. We have to work to nowadays. Depending who is rebaselining, if it's a contractor rebaselining the schedule, then they have to submit in a certain amount of time, let's say 20 business days, and you propose preliminary baseline, and then client or the owner of the project have to sit down with that contractor, approve the changes. I have this issue with PMs wanting to be in the schedule, right? And I'm like, yeah,
Can I have a license to Primavera P6? No.
And you're like, you know what? I have another great tool for you called P6 Team Member.
Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction and Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Piippo, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
Hi, my name is Layla McIntyre, and I'm project controls lead for Sobin.
Today, we are going to jump into a hot mess. Layla's going to be tackling a project that has gone off the rails. Are you ready, Layla?
No.
None of us ever are. And the funny thing before the episode kicked off, we were talking, and it was like your number one strategy. If someone comes to you with this opportunity, you just say no. But if we did that, we wouldn't be able to film a full episode. So let's say this project is a large pharmaceutical facility, $10+ billion, a multi-year effort, and it is currently running 6 months late, and costs are going out of control. You've been asked by the VP, you have all access, all powers to fix it. How do you do it?
First, probably, my specialty is in scheduling, and I probably firstly would do a delay analysis to figure out what happened from the scheduling perspective, why we got so far out, and go from there. Probably start with their processes, because one of the main concerns when such large projects go off the rails is something's wrong with the processes. Somebody was not following the steps. That would be my first concern.
Well, let's dive into that delay analysis, because I have a feeling you got a pretty good tactic and strategy there. Walk us through just some of those steps when you're looking at delay analysis, and get as granular as you want. Like what sort of, are you grabbing the weekly update files? Are you looking for other information? And let us know how what your delay analysis looks like.
Well, I'll tell you from a personal experience. Firstly, we have to identify who are the contractors, right? And what sometimes, unfortunately, when consultancy, like we are, brought too late to the project, we didn't have any say in the choosing of the contractors, right? And then you come to the picture and you're like, oh, that person was not qualified for the job. So you get into it and you find out that they themselves, the contractors, had a very weak processes established, right? For example, I don't know, the weather delay was not considered in original baseline, and you hit with like 3 hurricanes right after another. And there you go, you have over a month delay already on something like pharmaceutical manufacturing constructions, usually very high critical projects. And if you're late to provide medication to the patients. So it's very critical. 1 month delay and 3 or up to 3 month delays can be very crucial. Yeah, we would dive into their processes on the contractor. We would dive into the contract itself, what was required to provide. And usually, if project controls professionals are not included in the original contract negotiations, probably you know it as well. The wording in the contract for project controls is almost to non-existent. So when you're trying to say, hey, give me your variation report, and they say, it's not in the contract, you're like, whoop, can't ask that. And then you go to the client and you say, hey, can I see the contract? No, you're a consultant. Well, like, how can I help you?
Let's say this client is much more open for help, and you have gone through their processes, and let's say that delay impact analysis or the delay reporting that you would expect is not there. How do you go about getting that in place? Like, walk us through a little bit about what you'd be looking for, and then how you kind of, would work that in for a contract.
We had a experience where that was happening in one of my previous pharmaceutical projects, and we had to basically stop the project, stop the construction, pull all the subcontractors and contractors to re-pool planning, basically to redo the baseline. It was financial hit, but at the end it played out. We figured out where was the delay problems coming, and mostly it was from equipment ordering processes. So that was one of the major delays on the project. And back then there was some problems with China. So there was a lot of delays, air freight delays and sea delays. So that was basically one of the reasons. And we had to rebaseline the schedule. We had to re-go again. Basically, it was about a month shutdown on the construction. But it paid out to be a very good exercise to do the pool planning again. Basically, there was a very little communication between contractor and subcontractors, and that was one of the lessons learned from the delay analysis. There was a delay in the communication chain, kind of a delay on approval processes. So we were able to kind of rethink the situation.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. When you go into those environments, let's say this hypothetical situation you're dealing with now, and you have a 6-month delay, and then you're going to pull everybody in to go do one of those kind of pool planning events. Could you walk us through how you do it? Is it like bring everybody in the room, grab some sticky notes, like kind of tee this up? And what are your tips and strategies on how to lead one of those?
Basically, you go back to the basis, how it's always been done. You put it on the whiteboard with the sticky notes, right? John, what's your process? He gives you 5 main tasks. You put those sticky notes on the board. I don't know, Steven, tell me how your processes flow from that process. Put your sticky notes on the board. And they're like, okay, everybody agrees. And you have a whole room in sticky notes. And sometimes it takes 3 days, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, it depending on the size of the project and how many people were involved. I would start always from leads for the departments, from the list from the process standpoint. Construction is probably not the most crucial thing in pharmaceutical. The most crucial thing is commissioning and validation. Ultimately, everything has to be approved to provide with medication.
Yeah.
It will be a lot of process people sitting in that room as well, because they have to ultimately align all the factory acceptance tests and site acceptance tests, make sure they have a crew that will be able to do that. So full planning is one of the probably most, let's rephrase it, one of the better ways to do planning on a pharmaceutical project.
I've noticed that on more the more complicated the project is and the more stakeholders are going to be involved at the end, the more that they are involved in the actual delivery of like what is being delivered, what condition, what's set. What question for you? When you're doing the pull plan, are you doing a backwards pass? Or are you putting milestones up and then sticky notes going to the left? Or you have the milestone out there, the sticky notes are going to the right?
We usually do backward pass because ultimately when the project is in pre-negotiations, they already have the dates needed on the market. So because of that, we have to do the backward pass because we have those dates, I don't know, 9 years out. We have to kind of work to nowadays.
Yeah.
It's an exercise, let me tell you.
A lot can happen in 9 years.
Yes.
So then if you do the backwards pass and, how do you take that, then the sticky notes, and convert that into something that is usable? Like what's your kind of, let's say you send this project, it's 6 months late, you did a backwards pass, you got it down to like only 2 months late based on your backwards pass. How do you take that? Like I'm just picturing, the standard large construction trailer just completely covered in sticky notes. How do you take that and then convert it into something that is now more usable?
I prefer do it by the disciplines, right? It depending on what machines have to be installed on the shop floor, and I would basically give each process their colored sticky notes, and I would have their particular days when I'm creating their flows. And then I would collect on the last couple of days their leads with their colors and kind of say, okay, this is your process, this is your process, this is your process. Let's see how you all work together. That would be like the last thing analysis on the delay. And I'm like, everybody agrees. Okay, this is your result.
Cool. And so then are you flipping that into like a Primavera P6 or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be creating master schedule from those processes.
Now, how long does that take you? Is it's a couple days worth of sticky notes. How long is it taking you to flip that into Primavera? Are you doing it? Are you doing it as it goes along? And the reason why is because I think there's a lot of people out there who like have never done this before, or they've done this before with varied success. So that's why we kind of get down to like, I know there's someone out there who's like, I really want to do this in my project, but I don't know how. And so, what's your strategy there as you start to build out this plan?
It depends on the size of your project, right? Currently, for example, we have several buildings involved in this large capex, and I have a scheduler assigned per building. So if I would be doing pool planning, I would probably go by building. While I'm doing the planning for a next building, the first scheduler would probably start putting it in the P6 while I'm with other people in the room. You have to first realize how big is your project, right? How many resources and scheduling specifically you need to complete that task. Sometimes for pool planning purposes, you can also literally hire a consultancy just for that purpose, just to do the pool planning, and it's their responsibility to come up with the initial preliminary baseline at the end of the pool planning. It all depends on the size of the project.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Okay, so let's say you've gotten that project, you magically in the poll plan, the magic of the sticky notes, knocked off 4 months of that delay. You got 2 months left. You get into Primavera P6. You start that update progressing cycle. How are you thinking about either removing that 2 months left of delay or de-risking the project so you actually only deliver 2 months?
In my experience, what we had to do is we had to submit a change order for that time delay. And in that case, when we redid the pool planning, it was, like I said, the subcontractors and contractors' fault kind of in the failed communication. So they basically absorbed that change because thankfully that was in the contract. They absorbed that delay, and yes, you have to accept the outcomes. But what we did on this project is in the pharmaceutical environment, you always have to go through the gate approvals. And this time around, we went to the first initial gate approval for funding with enough of a float on top of the date deliverables that contractors gave us. So we kind of still had the wiggle room to play, even though right now on some of the buildings we're delayed. But because we had that cap on top of it, we're able to kind of work in it.
So then after you file the change order, you do like a rebaseline to kind of zero out the float and reset.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go through that process? I mean, you have the schedule. Do you get any further input in from the subcontractors or the general contractors when you walk through that? Or is that something, okay, can you walk us through how you kind of facilitate that process? Because I know people out there, and I've dealt with it before, where you go to do a rebaseline and it just stretches on for months and months and months. And then by that time, while you're doing the rebaseline, another delay happens.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well,
now you're living in like 14 different parallel universes of like, is this the previous baseline or the baseline or the future baseline?
Excuse me, I'm going over my cold. So you have to make sure that the processes that you issued contractually to your contractor stated all that, right? Rebaseline is a part of your basis of schedule. So you have to have it stated in the basis of schedule when you submit it to the contractor, saying that at some point in time, you will have to do that. So later, when you do have to do that, they don't have questions of how long it takes. Matter of fact, I had to revise the basis of schedule yesterday, submit it for approval, and we made sure the exact dates that a client thought is appropriate are included in that basis of schedule.
Yeah. What are your kind of top must-haves on a rebaseline in your basis of schedule? Like, what are kind of your things that you're like, if I, slap one down in front of you, those are the first couple things you're going to look for when you go through a basis of like a rebaseline, that piece in the contract?
So depending who is rebaselining, if it's a contractor rebaselining the schedule, then they have to submit in certain amount of time, let's say 20 business days, and you propose preliminary baseline, and then client or the owner of the project have to sit down with that contractor, approve the changes, right, and go from there. I also like to leave about a week of scheduling analysis to the schedulers, kind of come up with what if scenarios and Monte Carlo, just with the risk managers, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understand what is the initial dates after that rebaseline.
Ooh, that's interesting. Further questions coming on the Monte Carlo,
I should stop talking, right? Because
I know you just got to be like, and that's enough for me. Bye bye. Everything you say is just we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. But I
I've
kind of
been burying myself. That's what I keep doing with this project. Is like, Layla, stop opening your damn mouth.
Yeah,
And they're
no.
like, we can do that? How do we do that, God?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just a little bit more on the basis schedule. So you mentioned the time period in the comments and things like that. What are just some things on, basic kind of schedule requirements that also be included in your in that baseline requirement, I mean, anything you can think of, codes or whatever you kind of just normally see and look for.
Well, usually right now, clients kind of, or owners, I should say, don't like resource-loaded schedules. What they like is cost-loaded schedules, right? So we'll put what kind of cost needs to be there, if it's a per milestone or level of effort or whatever that is. Also, like reconfirm what kind of durations, whereas the max duration per activity have to be there. If you have, I don't know, more than, let's say, 15 working days duration activity or a float, it has to be an activity. If it's a more than, I don't know, 5 days lag, it has to be an activity and stuff like that. So on a preliminary baseline, I usually use Acumen or any software of that liking to see what are the lags and how we can clean up the schedule, basically. And I would issue it back to the contractor and say, here, you want to use this instead? This is prettier. They usually say, what did you do?
Yeah.
And you're like, you're
Yeah.
welcome. But
Yeah.
I would
You open
address,
it up and there's just 3,000 negative lags. You're like, oh, this is
you know what?
interesting.
You know what hurts my eyes the most and probably makes me enraged is start to finishes. Like,
Yeah.
how long have you been a scheduler? That's my first question, right? I don't know. Somebody
Yeah.
says 6 years. How do you not know that you don't use this logic in the schedules? Like
Yeah.
you're messing up your critical path. What do you mean? I was like, they just like how good your logic work, just in your own head, right? Like how can you start before the finish? Like just put it
Yeah.
on in your head. And they're like,
The
yeah, that doesn't work. I'm like, yeah.
I know. I know. The only time I ever use it is when I'm making like a high level cartoon schedule.
Exactly.
And I,
Like if you do a
and I
snowflake,
just,
sure.
yeah, like if you just kind of, and it's for like, and it's very, very rare because usually I just will constrain it. Like, what's the point of using? But if I'm making like a very, very high level, and if I just, and it's like, I don't know, in 15 years of scheduling, maybe like 4 times
Exactly my point. Like we
a
have
low hit rate.
this client, they have over 145 pages of a schedule. First of all, they shot themselves in the
Wait,
leg
hold on a
already by
second. Is it 11 by 17 or do
yeah,
they go by 8 by 11? Okay, so at least they bit the size up. It could be bigger.
145 pages of schedule. Like, first of all, you shot yourself in the leg by making such monstrosity when you were
Yeah.
only required to do a level 4, right?
Ooh.
So, and
Ooh.
then I run it through, like right now we have Smart PM. It's another tool like Acumen. So I run it
Yeah.
through Smart PM and it has like, I don't know, 800 start to finishes. I'm like, what are you doing, guys? And they're trying to like defend their case and saying all that logic is valid. You're like, no, it's not valid, guys.
Yeah. Someone misread the manual. Okay, so transition off that and moving in, you brought up a Monte Carlo. And I think, my high level question is, on this one is you have a decent, let's say you've checked the box of like, you have a decent schedule, you've done the health analysis, you've ran through the logic paths, you've done all that stuff. So you're like, this is worthy enough of running a risk analysis on. And let's say you do that. When you start looking at the different uncertainties you can apply, I think the standard is like 80, 100, 120.
Mm-hmm.
How are you working through that process to then kind of get that range that the Monte Carlo is going to kick out? Because that's the thing that's always interested me the most about the risk analysis is like, it's a little bit sometimes overlooked to me,
Mm-hmm.
and the different ranges people apply and how they apply them. And the stock one is always kind of crazy to me because, the 80 assumes that 20% of the time you do better. And more often than not, I'm like, I don't see that actually happening. And so it probably creates a more rosier picture than probably what's out there. So when you look at your Monte Carlos, how are you going through that sort of process and unfolding in risks and all that good stuff?
So usually I only support that effort from scheduling perspective. So what we do is I ask my schedulers to sit down with the PMs, respective PMs, and create kind of a high level summary schedule from whatever they created, like let's say 100 activities max, and then go over those and submit the Monte Carlo criteria for each. Sometimes if it's a schedule is too big, I kind of have to rely on a function of Acumen where it sets up the criteria automatically. You just move the level in there and you're like, realistic, great, go with that. But usually I was working for Eli Lilly as a consultant and we had to do line by line. It was a painstaking effort. But basically they were like, oh, just put something, add 10 days. I'm like, no, you really have to think about it. Because then you provide a tornado diagram, right? And they're like, well, that's
Yeah.
not valid. And you're like, well, that's what you give me. I always, my motto in scheduling is garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's what you gave me. This is what you give as a report, get as a report back. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say the main thing is educating. Is first of all educating your PMs, your project coordinators, whoever is responsible for updating that schedule, not a scheduler. Why you're doing that, first of all, and then probably everybody likes pretty pictures. So get yourself a very good risk management tool. For example, you can use even Risk OPC, right? It's a Oracle ran risk management and connect your schedules actually in there. And that actually worked really well on current project we're on. That's what we use. We use OPC risk. We're doing QRAs every 3 months and on the summary level. So we're like having 80 to 100 line items and more of
Oh,
a
nice.
summarizing WBSs that we have in the master schedules.
Gotcha. And how have you seen the standardization of that process go? Because a lot of times if you, when I've done, large scale risk management efforts or
Mhm.
risk, running risk analysis, there's like 5,000 different buttons different people can click, and people love to click buttons.
Yeah, well, you just don't let them click the buttons. You're giving them PDF.
All right. Most answers is take the human out of the button clicking. Awesome.
Yes,
Perfect.
yes.
Yeah,
Or
okay, very cool.
I have this not incoming, but ever so popping issue with PMs wanting to be in the schedule, right? And I'm like, yeah,
Can I have a license to Primavera
Yeah,
P6? No.
And you're like, you know what? I have another great tool for you called P6 Team Member. And I will show you how it works there. It's like, but I don't see a Gantt chart. It's okay. I'll give you a PDF. But you can still see your activities in the team member. It's a great tool. There you go. Read only.
Yeah. And I feel like you give a project manager an access to Primavera P6, and all of a sudden you come back later and your beautiful finish to start schedule, start to finish.
Yep.
And then you got to realize you paid thousands of dollars to let that happen. Probably one of the worst investments. Well, Leila, I feel like we got you. You've gotten us out of the hot mess that we started out with, and really appreciate you saving this project that's gone off the rails. Before we jump, any final words or final thoughts for the audience?
No, it's just I think, what is it word in English? I forgot this expression, but your whole thing is in processes. You have to make sure you wrote that process, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to do any kind of effort with a contractor on the owner's side, if you don't have a process for that, they will not do anything. At the end of the day, it's all falls down to the paper, what you put on the paper.
I'm going to have you back on. We'll shoot an entire episode just on that, because it's such a critical piece of the project delivery cycle, and especially planning and scheduling, where there's so many different means and methods and ways to do things, and wrong ways to do things, right ways to do things. And yeah, so perfect last words. Well, for us from Beyond Deadlines, thank you again for watching this week, and we'll see you on the next one.